So tonight, I wanted to talk about becoming, being, and seeing beauty, becoming and being beautiful. And I wanted to start off from this quote that you may know, and it's an excerpt from a quote by E. E. Cummings, which I particularly like. I'll put it in the chat. And it's to be nobody but yourself in a world which is doing its best night and day to make you everybody else means to fight the hardest battle which any human being can fight and never stop fighting. To be nobody but yourself in a world which is doing its best night and day to make you everybody else means to fight the hardest battle which any human being can fight and never stop fighting. And this might seem a little strange to start off a Buddhist talk about fighting. And also this kind of way that we're, like, oh, let's just let go of the self and all of that. And I feel that it's really important for us to know that we are each deserving of being here and being fought for. And because we are receiving so many messages from so many places in society, it's really hard to know what that means. And to be nobody but yourself, to be who you are, is so, so necessary and significant. This excerpt from E. Cummings from a poem, and it starts off about being a poet. And E. Cummings says, a poet is somebody who feels and who expresses their feelings through words. This may sound easy. It isn't. A lot of people think or believe or know they feel, but that's thinking or believing or knowing, not feeling. And poetry is feeling, not knowing or believing or thinking. Almost anybody can learn to think or believe or know, but not a single human being can be taught to feel. Why? Because whenever you think or you believe or you know, you're a lot of other people. But the moment you feel, you're nobody but yourself. And then there's this excerpt that I said, to be nobody but yourself in a world which is doing its best night and day to make you everybody else needs to fight the hardest battle which any human being can fight and never stop fighting. And so for me, this practice of meditation, of mindfulness, this Buddhist practice of becoming intimate with the way things are, coming close to this moment, coming close to this one here, is this beyond words. It is this poetry. It's this moving into a place of intuitive feeling, not instructions. There are instructions, but these are, you know, who is this one here? Beyond the prescriptions and the perceptions and the projections and all of that. What does it mean to find beauty, to love this one here? Many of you know the amazing performance artist, writer, Alok Menon, who, among many things, wrote Beyond the Gender Binary. And they say, common sense is what happens when a particular point of view is regarded as the status quo because it's held by the people in power, not necessarily because it is right. Let me put that in the chat. Um, so this idea, and perhaps, you may have at some time been told that whatever you're doing or whoever you are or all of that doesn't make sense. And I love this positioning of this idea that common sense, it's only common sense because it's held by the people in power, not because it's necessarily right. Like it doesn't make sense that you want to be X, Y, or Z. And this bringing of our curiosity, of our inquisitiveness, of our not knowing, is part of the practice of mindfulness, of loving awareness, of really figuring out beyond those places that we've been told, how is it now? What is happening here? There's a story that I may have told here, so my apologies if you've heard me share it before, but it was just such an amazing experience for me. And many of you know that I often work with kids and often, kind of like tweens. And so I was at this family retreat at Spirit Rock. And as the case will be with any group of people, after a few days, things start happening and people kind of start getting into it with each other. And so I was sharing with this group of kids about how hard it was for me when I was young and how like everybody was trying to put me in a different box, this box or that box, you're a girl, you're smart, you're whatever you were, they're all trying to put me in boxes. And that I really felt like it was just like this idea, like, or like they were cutting off parts of me, like to fit me in the right size, like it was always being trimmed in a different way, like there's like a square peg in a round hole kind of thing. And after I told this story to the kids who, I can't say it was miraculous, but it did help them know this sense of like trying to figure it all out was part of this process. One of the kids in the group came up to me and said, I know why you had such a hard time with it being a square peg in a round hole, because you needed a heart-shaped hole. You needed a heart-shaped hole. And I just was like, oh my gosh. And I immediately just burst into tears. And I just was like, wow, you really got me. Like you totally just got me. And so you're like, but we all need those heart-shaped holes, right? We all need to be seen. We all need to like stop being pushed and fit and squeezed into somebody who we're not. The funny thing about this story was that this particular kid often got into like uh, challenges, shall we say. And so the kid went up to, and I didn't hear this part, but one of my other coworkers heard this part. And the child, tween went up to one of his moms at lunch and said, "I made my teacher cry today." And the parent was like, "Oh no!" But then when they shared that it was like for like being like beautiful and wonderful, the mother was like so touched. But it was just that sense of here was this person that really got what it was like to be squeezed, and that tension that happens from being pushed in all these directions. And so this liberating practice of how do we turn towards ourselves? How do we have that confidence underneath all of these stories that are told to us in society, in our families, in our jobs, everywhere we look, that we are not worthy, we are not beautiful. You know, we are so often erased, and if we're not erased, we're just summarily dismissed or overlooked. How do we refuse to be bound by the boxes? When we're already leaking all over the edges, can we really begin to celebrate the weeds, celebrate the misgivings? No part left out. All the parts that we don't want to look at, can we invite them in with our practice, seeing clearly? And can we invite ourselves to be surprised, to be curious, that maybe what we least expected is actually where the beauty lies, that we may not have been taught to see the beauty there, but maybe it is there. There's this beautiful poem by Izumi Shikubi, who's a Japanese poet. And this is one of my favorite poems. And you may have heard it from other Buddhist teachers too. But she says, Watching the moon at midnight, solitary mid-sky, I knew myself completely, no part left out. And this is what I attempt with my practice, to see if I could know myself, love myself completely, no part left out. I don't think I'm there, but I'm tempting. Like there's certainly a lot of things I get super irritated and would rather dismiss. And in this practice of mindfulness or loving awareness, we think of these three ways that the mind responds to each moment. There's three possibilities. And to me, this is very useful because I get so confused. But when something arises, we can move towards it and want it, and that craving can arise. If something can arise, we can be like, move away from it. Or if something arises, we can just be like spacing out and ignorant and not responsive. And so, in those three, how am I responding in this moment? Am I responding with wanting? Am I responding with aversion? Or am I responding with, And those are kind of like the way that in Buddhism we have the negative. So there's greed, hatred, and ignorance. And so oftentimes those are the three forces that are kind of conditioning our experience. And so when something happens in me, I might respond with, "Oh, I love that part of me. Let me be that person." And the greed will like just become blossoming. And then or it's like, "Oh, I really was trying to be more of this, and then I'm not like that part." Or like I'll be just like, "Oh, can I just like stick my head in the sand now and pretend like that's not even happening?" So this way of actually meeting and coming close to what's happening, which I don't know, I always do this because it's not like pushing away, it's not bringing, it's like, can I just meet what's happening? And also this sense of if we're looking at it moment to moment, we're not on a linear path. We're not like bettering and bettering and bettering and bettering. We're like gardens, we're just messed up gardens of this blooming over here, and oh, it's not the season for that. We better add more compost or dig that part up. It's not a progressive situation that we're in. And so these places that we think, oh my gosh, got to get rid of that, that might just be the time that we need to be fallow. The garden is resting. And in comes this everyone's common sense of like, shouldn't be that way. And then the judging mind arises. We think we should be, that sense of should. And so, I wonder about these messages that, the through lines that just we have learned that end up with the judging mind taking the bait, hooking in, and being like, you're not this enough, not that enough, not this enough, whatever, fill in the blank. And then those of us who have found ourselves in the margins, marginalized or, deviants or outlandish, eccentric, unconventional, weird, we can love that part of ourselves at the same time that we can be like, oh, how do I censor that just enough to just fit in over here or make myself over there? It's such a long journey to coming home. Such a long journey to coming home to oneself. And yet it can happen in any instant. I want to share another quote from a Buddhist teacher, Sebene Selassie, whose book, You Belong, A Call for Connection, I really recommend. And she says, being present is an opportunity to adore oneself so completely that imperfections are part of the perfection of your being. no part left out. Until we contend with that, our practice is simply a battle with ourselves, a self-evaluation project dressed up as self-acceptance. Put that in the chat. So she says, you know, can we adore ourselves so completely that imperfections are the perfection of your being? And that's kind of like one of the Zen koans, that you are perfectly imperfect kind of thing, and I love this second part too, this way that we can kind of pretend, oh, I'm accepting everything, but I'm really doing this self-evaluation project, and I'm pretending self-acceptance. And sometimes that's okay because sometimes we have to pretend until we see that we actually can accept it. And we're like, I can accept this too. Because like, how do I come up with these ideas of what is good, what is not, what is lovable, what can I adore, what is it that I honor, what is I discredit. So as I investigate all of these judgments, I can begin to see what it is, the attitude of mind that I think of as normal or better or best. And so beauty, the sense of beauty, to me is a word that brings in something because it doesn't have to be attractive. It doesn't have to be that sense of beauty in the world because we all know that there's been moments where we're just like drawn to the beauty of the shadow or the light on the wall or the way a tree branch crosses another branch, or a way a little kid, walks down the street. So all of those can be beautiful. And this is a place I think that is beyond the comparing mind. And in Buddhism, the word for this process of thinking, that's the measuring and comparing mind, is mana, M-A-N-A. And it's often translated as conceit, but it's actually not a noun, it's a process. So it's this measuring, it's the sense of I'm better than, or that's better than, or I'm worse than, or I'm equal to. And I think this is really amazing because this sense of like comparing, like I'm better than, or I'm less than, or I'm equal to, the same as, is one of the places that suffering happens. And this is where I think the self, can we be ourselves? So the Buddha is saying that you, not only are you not better than, not worse than, you're not equal to, you're not the same as. And so, for example, as somebody who is genderqueer, I think this is so queer. There's no way you can even be the same as anybody out there. You're just queer. You're queer. Everybody's queer. You can't fit into anywhere because you're not the same as, you're not worse than, you're not even equal to. You are who in the universe of yourself. So in these, what the Buddha is saying is that these are all, this measuring mind is a way that the mind can get colored. So the mind can be colored by these thoughts of shame or blame or worse or better than. And then we begin to see through those filters. And so that's what is part of this seeing clearly what's happening when we practice in our meditation, so that when things happen in the world, we can see clearly. So mindfulness is this practice which helps us not to get caught in these mind states of greed or hatred or better or worse, or even this ignorance of not realizing that we're caught. So at any point we can be like, oh, I'm caught. I didn't realize that I was in this, seeing things through this shame, but I'm feeling this contraction in my body. I'm feeling this experience. And now I can see that I'm caught. And as we learn to see these forces that are operating underneath, It's not me. It's not mine. This is greed. This is the force of greed. This is what happens when greed takes over. This is the force of aversion. This is what happened when aversion takes over. So it's not me. It's not mine. This is what it means to be a human. We have these experiences. And kind of like what I was talking about at the beginning about being a poet and figuring out your feelings, it's like, how do I get to know this one and how this one expresses? So pausing in the midst of all that muck, the picture that Crystal started us off with, the lotus that's in the mud, like in the muck. How do we go into the muck to express and feel what is there? This curiosity, bringing in to break open from the habit patterns of mind, whether they're internal or external, understanding these patterns so that all of these places that we've absorbed messages that we can break free from to really know what it means to be ourselves. So one of the ways that I think that's so important is to really not just take the sense of something happening and then internalize it and think that we are the ones to blame. And in the processes of practice, what I think can be really helpful is knowing that sometimes that will happen and that one of the skillful responses is the practice of loving kindness. And so through this process, as we come home to who we are, sometimes the process of offering love to all these places within ourselves can be really challenging. And it may not make sense. And so for me, it's just been this commitment to just trying to show up over and over again, even if it's not landing. Just like the way you water a seed and you're kind of like go back every day and check to make sure, see if it's grown yet, and it hasn't. But, and that it's just like you're kind of just watering those seeds of kindness, watering the seeds of kindness, knowing that that's skillful and it's not an instant process that takes time. That there is beauty around me, there is beauty within me, feeling that connection to myself and to others, and taking time to see if there's possibility to shift the perspective, to see if there's any room to like just open to that possibility, bringing in curiosity and creativity and compassion, not in a way that we're denying what's happening here, but just opening to, hmm, might there be another way? That was one of the things that the Buddha said on the night of their awakening. Might there be another way? And so when I'm kind of stuck or something and I'm just like, ugh, I just think, well, like, might there be another way? So, no! And so like, might there be another way? And just even in that pause, being like, oh, honey, ouch. Or like, wow, look at the clouds. Just the pause of shifting from the conditions that push me in a certain direction to the possibility of curiosity, to the possibility of compassion, to the possibility of beauty. So I'm going to end with this quote from Ocean Vuong, who says, remember, the rules, like streets, can only take you to known places. Underneath the grid is a field. It was always there. Where to be lost is never wrong, but simply more. As a rule, be more. Remember, the rules, like streets, can only take you to places. Underneath the grid is a field. It was always there. Where to be lost is never wrong, but simply more. As a rule, be more. So, invitation is for all of us to be more of who we are, to come home and this practice of kindness, loving acceptance. Thank you for your kind attention.